This is the Rewilding garden at Knepp. It's a walled garden and it was a croquet lawn about 2.5 years ago. And at Knepp is the site of the oldest rewilding project in the UK, and a lawn wasn't really cutting it in terms of diversity of habitat that we'd like to see in the garden. So we took various cues from the wider landscape, the animals and their interactions with the landscape and what has happened, and we tried to mix it up in here as gardeners, as the keystone species in the garden. So we've varied the topography, we've changed the soil types by using the materials that we've got available. We're trying to think all the time in terms of mosaics, or kaleidoscopes is the word that we like to use here, because that implies that there's some movement. And movement is really key in a functioning ecosystem. So we take all our cues from out there, and we, as the keystone species, we steer it in the direction that we'd like to see in terms of maximising biodiversity, which is the end goal with this garden experiment. So we know that uniformity is sort of not really seen in nature that often. So what we try to do is vary the topography as much as we can. So just by varying the topography, creating lumps and bumps, we get that variation of ecological conditions. So at the bottom, that's where the water falls, that's where it's really wet, and this area through here is flooded for about 4 months of the year. And then at the top, that's where it's driest. We've got shady bits, we've got sunny bits on the south side, and then different bands of productivity in our soils, and that's where we've tried to add various materials that we had available to us. And we've just built a new cafe and shop, and on that site we had a few farm buildings which don't exist anymore, and they are here. This is nearly a completely crushed farm building, and all of these plants growing out of it. So you've got really harsh, alkaline, concretey conditions in here, right the way through to our good old Rewilding clay. There's 320 metres of it underneath our feet, and the water just sits. It's really sticky, really sort of nutritious, but you know, a lot of nutrients get locked up because it's so anaerobic quite a lot of the time. So you've got that transition of different conditions. So in terms of mosaics, we've got different pieces here dotted around. And the thought behind that is that the wider range of conditions that you've got, the more plants that you can grow, the more wildlife we can hopefully support. So we're very clear, this is an experiment. We're not saying it's the silver bullet, but we are trying to think outside the box with our approach to gardens. How can we make a garden as biodiverse as we can make it? So that's why we're trying all sorts of different things. And as I said, the end goal was maximising the number of species that we have here. And from our baseline invertebrate surveys that we conducted three years ago, we jumped by 33%. So hopefully we're going in the right direction. We're looking at the soil, taken baseline data in terms of the soil as well. So we're looking at the microfauna under a microscope, seeing how that changes. How can concrete become a living soil? It's going to be really, really interesting to see. But monitoring is really part of it. It's an experiment, and we're getting data from that. We look at the plants that just turn up of their own accord, and we as gardeners, we curate them. So quite a lot of the things that people are so rude to call weeds, things like ribwort plantain and scentless mayweed, and there's a buddleia through there, and look at that wild carrot floating through there. We assess the role that they can play in this ecosystem, where we, the gardener, are the keystone species. How many species can they support? Do they look nice? Do they have a deep taproot that's going to break through our really compacted clay? You know, do they have a place in this ecosystem? And we've got over 100 of those plants that just popped up, which most people, I suppose, would probably get rid of, and we curate them. Sometimes we will go in there with the hedging shears, browse them down when they're about to go to seed and go everywhere, but they still have a place here. I mean, we see ourselves as our small garden team as a herd of herbivorous animals sort of walking through the landscape and grazing, essentially, nibbling away at things, because it's that constant interaction that rewilding is built on. A lot of people think rewilding is just close the gate and walk away and let it just get on with it, but you need those natural processes, and that's a really key phrase, and that's what inspires this whole project. People come through the gate and they think, this isn't really what I thought rewilding to be. You know, gardens are unique quite domestic context. You know, it's not pure ecological restoration out there. If this is going to be a sort of model for what people can do in their own gardens, we're not going to just chuck in a whole lot of Tamworth pigs and let them have a right old go. We're trying to see what we as gardeners can do, what is applicable to other garden sites. So really rewilding the garden is a shift in mindset. And you know, if rewilding is restoring natural processes and creating these sort of kaleidoscopes of different habitats, then can you rewild a garden? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. And it's just not usually what people expect to see. You know, quite a lot of the plants in here are from further south in Europe or from more sort of Mediterranean climates. And the reason we plant those alongside native plants is to pack out that opportunity, extend the season as long as we can. You know, for something like an echinacea here, to our pollinating insects, there's one on my face right now. This is just another composite flower structure. It's a native family, and they can access what they need from it. It's just, you know, you get some insects that are pretty picky, and so that's why we grow plants that they're going to lay their eggs on, or most likely to. When people come to NEP, they expect a little bit of, you know, something different. So if we were in a sort of National Trust garden or something like that, it might, I don't know, you'd get probably a visitorship that might be more critical. But I think it's been received pretty well so far. But we still like trying to shock people at times. You can absolutely use this approach and grow food too. I mean, what we're doing next door in our kitchen garden is we're trying to do just that. If you think all the time about your garden as a mosaic, if you think in terms of layers from a variety of different vegetation structures, you can get that in. Quite a lot of the shrubs we've got next door are things like currants and unusual edibles, things like we've got dead man's fingers, which is this sort of sausage fruit type shrub, right through to a sort of edible ground layer. We've really tried to think outside the box in terms of the things that we could eat, but not just stuff that we could eat, other things like rosaceous fruit, which birds might like. We bring them in, they might have a high chance of eating things that might be eating our veg too. That's the thought. So if you just think in terms of mosaics, it's up to you what you do with that sort of variety of different structures, and that's what we've been trying to play with next door. So we hope that this experiment might inspire our visitors, and they might be inspired to use the very unique context of your own gardens to do similar things to hopefully see an uplift in wildlife. And we do have plenty of workshops and tours and open days here, which you can book through our website, when we're looking into the design of the garden, you know, how we planted it, but also how we manage it, how we record biodiversity. And we do a series of workshops in recording or monitoring biodiversity with Kate Bradbury, the wildlife gardening author. We also have ecology tours looking at garden ecology too, and also growing veg. And we do that in collaboration with our market garden over the other side of the estate. So I hope that you might be able to come and visit and be inspired in your own way.